Spurs nil, Arsenal 1, and Arsenal remain supreme in the North London derby after beating Spurs yet again, as recent history has repeated itself. Despite all the discourse and debates amongst Arsenal fans and amongst rival fans as well about how Arsenal would cope with the injury of Martin Odegaard and not really having a suitable replacement in that number 10 position. In addition to that, also the fact that Declan Rice was not available for this derby, it led a lot of people to make some bold predictions. I saw people getting absolutely abused online and getting clowned for predicting that Arsenal would still win despite all their injuries. And here we are. The people who had faith in Spurs are learning the hard way once more that when it actually matters and when it comes down to it, you cannot trust Tottenham Hotspur to get the job done because they are Bottle Job FC at the end of the day. This is the best chance in recent memory that they had to beat Arsenal because this Arsenal team was not particularly great. The only thing that separated these two teams today was a set-piece goal, courtesy of Gabriel Magalhaes. Up until that point, I don't really think Arsenal did anything in the game. Yes, they had some decent chances in the first half. Martinelli in particular having a golden chance, one that he definitely should have buried or at the very least passed to Bakayoko Saka for an easy tap-in, and he didn't. What a stinker by Martinelli yet again. Going missing once more in a big game for Arsenal. But even with that, it still felt like Arsenal were just going to be fine. It never felt like Spurs were actually piling on the pressure as a neutral. As a neutral watching this game, I'm going to keep it a stack. At no point did I feel like Spurs were actually going to go on and convert any of their half chances or any of their possession into tangible pressure for Arsenal Football Club. It always felt like Arsenal, despite not playing at their best and despite not having their best 11, was still the better team and still were capable of nicking a goal and just shutting up shop and closing it out. And that's exactly what they did. Despite not having most of the possession, because I believe Spurs had about 64% possession in the game and had more total shots, if you look at the clear-cut chances created, Arsenal had more tangible, clear-cut chances created. And Arsenal, at the end of the day, affected the scoreboard when Spurs couldn't, which is exactly what I expected to happen. And just looking at that Spurs team, they were let down by a collective effort today, not just necessarily individuals, but just collectively, they were not good enough. They were not brave enough, and they did not show the cutting edge and the minerals required to win in a game of this magnitude. I think Solanke arguably had one of the best chances of the game, if I'm not mistaken, where early on, Arsenal essentially gave away the ball on the edge of their box. Solanke takes too many touches, and Arsenal have enough time to recover. Again, Saliba and Magalhaes, I think, were the standout players in this North London derby. Arsenal weren't great either, but the two players that I think played well for Arsenal was Saliba and Magalhaes. Everyone else was underwhelming. You could say that for both sides. And it was just one of those games. It came down to who was going to be able to nick it, and Arsenal at the end of the day, as expected, reigned supreme. Spurs, just not good enough. Maddison, biblical stinker. He was just missing today. And maybe I'm being harsh on Maddison. Let me know in the comments down below if you're a Spurs fan. But honestly, why does it feel like this guy always goes missing in big games? There was a time when I was perplexed as to why no big clubs outside of Spurs went in for Maddison. But now I finally understand it. After doing a little bit of research for him when he did sign for Spurs, for the video I made about him reacting to him signing for Spurs, I finally understand why he is not really touted by the elite clubs. Because he just goes missing in the big games. There is an issue with Maddison, and there is an uncomfortable conversation that needs to happen around James Maddison if it hasn't happened already. He just isn't quite good enough when his team needs him the most, and he wasn't the only one. I think Bentancur was awful. I think Kulusevski wasn't good enough. Solanke, not good enough. Johnson, not good enough. Son, as much as I adore him, and he's my favorite player, probably, outside of Manchester United, he just wasn't good enough today, if I'm being completely honest. Christian Romero is the only player who can walk with chest, and maybe Vicario. Those are the only two players who can walk with chest away from today's North London derby with any sort of credit in the bank as far as Spurs are concerned, because everybody else on an individual level was awful. And on a collective level, questions need to be asked of Ange Postecoglou, because I like him. I think he's a dope manager. I think that he speaks really well about the game. He seems to have the right character and the right attitude. But for a club like Spurs, I question whether or not this guy will be successful, and I question whether or not he will get the tools and the minerals that he needs to create a successful team at Spurs, because he seems to be a very stubborn manager, and a manager who is incapable of humbling himself and realizing the level that he's at and saying, you know what, if I was at a big club, I would be able to do this thing that I'm trying to do. But because I'm at Spurs, it's just not going to work, especially in a game of this magnitude. This is the best chance we've had to beat our bitter rivals in a very long time, with two of their key midfield players missing. This is a chance to go for the jugular. This is a chance to really just grab them by the scruff of the neck and take the game to them. And yet, despite all the possession, despite all the shots, we didn't create any gilt-edged chances, and we didn't walk away with any tangible reasons to have our head held high and our chest puffed out and be happy with this result. I don't know. At some point, the stubbornness from Ange Postecoglou needs to be called out from Spurs fans. I know there are some Spurs fans who are already calling it out, but they're getting a lot of pushback and they're getting a lot of abuse online because, you know, they're not backing the manager and all of this stuff. But how can you, when it's so clear and obvious what the issue is? You cannot be this naive, especially against a team that's figured you out. Arsenal are a team that generally dominate possession and generally are the better team on the eye and on the stats sheet in most games that they play because they're that good. But then when it comes to Spurs, they're more than happy to concede possession, sit back and play on the break because they know that that is the kryptonite of the Spurs team. And yet Spurs do nothing about it. They play right into the hands of the opposition despite the opposition being better than them on every level, individually, tactically, technically, everything, every measure that you can possibly come up with. Arsenal are better than Spurs, and still that respect is not there. It's mind-boggling. But anyways, let's just talk a little bit about Arsenal. I've waffled enough about how bad Spurs are. They weren't particularly great today either. If it wasn't for Gabriel Magalhaes, this game could have ended in a 0-0 draw. And honestly, as a neutral watching, it wasn't quite the North London derby that I was eagerly anticipating. Honestly, it was quite, boring, if I'm being completely honest, compared to some fixtures in the past. However, it is still, I guess, encouraging. There is a silver lining if you're an Arsenal fan that despite all the injuries, despite all the absentees, and despite not having your best 11, you're still capable of winning a big game and seeing it out. Winning when you're not playing well is a very good sign. And that's something that Arsenal have shown a couple of times recently in big moments, right? They haven't quite gotten over the line, obviously, in terms of winning trophies, but they're showing good signs of a team that is capable on their day of really taking it to Manchester City. It's just a question of whether or not they can sustain this for the rest of the season and whether or not they've done enough business to cover the potential injuries that they will face this season, because I suspect that Odegaard will not be the last major injury Arsenal will have. They've been pretty lucky, if we're being honest, over the last 2 years with injuries, and I think that luck has run out. And Mikel Arteta is going to have a lot of sleepless nights trying to figure out how he's going to maintain a title charge with such limited resources. And we may look back on this summer transfer window that's recently just passed, as a huge mistake for Arsenal, especially when you look at fixtures like today, because they did not look like themselves at all. Could have been a little bit tactical, but I doubt it, to be honest. The likes of Jorginho, Martinelli and Partey playing together in the midfield does not seem sustainable at all. And if I was an Arsenal fan, despite being happy that we won the North London derby, despite being happy that we navigated the storm of missing Odegaard, there is still a lot of fear and trepidation and worry and concern that I would have as an Arsenal fan about how the rest of the season is going to play out. Because I don't think this Odegaard injury will be the last of Arsenal's headaches and problems this season. But anyways, it's been your boy Triple M. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Arsenal with a massive win over Spurs away from home despite missing their key creative force in the middle of the park. They still found a way to get it done. Spurs bottling as usual. Let me know what you think. Leave a like on the video if you want to support the channel. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. And as usual, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch my video. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Peace.